Hello kids, this is lesson 10, urban agglomerations. So I'm recording this class since we have had 2 Mondays with no classes. So I hope this will help you with lesson 10, urban agglomerations. And to begin, we have the definition of cities that I want you to have, which it will be that this one that it says a city typically includes residential areas where people live. We're talking about fraccionamientos en colonias here in our city. Industrial areas for factories or also maquilas. We also call them parques industriales here in our city. And commercial areas for stores and offices. Okay, these are the business districts and also some malls. Here it's mentioned the city's layout. Let me show you the city's layout. This is the city's layout. Okay, it is conformed with these 4 areas: central business district, inner city, suburbs, and rural urban fringe. The central business district says that is the center contains stores, businesses, offices, and entertainment. Okay, this is how it looks in our city. Okay, is downtown Chihuahua. Okay, the most important places from the central business district are the government offices, either from the municipality, from Congress, or state offices. We also have lots of space for cultural representations, artistic representations. We also have museums. We also have some theaters here. It is also the oldest part of the city. Okay, this is where the city was founded. Outside the central business district, we have the inner city. Okay, the inner city says here that once contained factories and workers' housing. Not anymore, since all those factories and other complexes, such as warehouses, were moved out from the inner city into the suburbs. Okay, now in the inner city, we have old houses. We have a lot of old houses. Colonia San Felipe is one of the colonias that are included in the inner city. Some of the characteristics of the inner city is that the old houses, now they are being used as businesses. Okay, perhaps you know the smokehouse. It used to be a house here. It was demolished and now it is a restaurant. All the buildings, now they are used for the government offices. And some of them, they have been totally demolished and been built again to have other type of businesses such as hotels. As for the suburbs, it says here in the description that these residential areas contain more modern housing with gardens and some services, such as local schools and shops. As you can see, the suburbs, we may consider that this is the last part of the city because it is where all the modern houses are built, the new fraccionamientos. And this is how it looks. Yes, exactly. They do have modern materials where they are made from concrete bricks. They also have a lot of commercial districts where you have everything here. Some of you may live in the suburbs where you have access to everything, access to all the services, restaurants, gyms, entertainment centers, etc. in these areas. And finally, we have the rural urban fringe. Some people don't know that this area also belongs to the city. Okay, this is where some of you have your farms. If your family or yourselves have a farm, a granja, this is where it is located, outside of the city. This is also part of the city, okay? This is how it looks, the rural urban fringe, okay, where people has their farms with trees that produce fruit. You have also a lot of empty spaces on this area, but sooner or later they're going to build houses or businesses on this area. And also you may have some roads that they do not have pavement. You may also have neighbors, or even your families may have some farm animals on this area. Sooner or later, kids, this area, the rural urban fringe, is going to become suburbs, okay? As the suburbs, like 10, 20 years ago, they were part of the rural urban fringe. This is going to develop, this is going to get urbanized. Okay, so we can see we have some advantages and disadvantages of living in the city. Okay, advantages means positive things. We are close to business districts. We have access to lots of entertainment and cultural centers such as movie theaters, libraries. We have access to schools, to concerts, etc. We also have access to public transportation. This is something that only happens in the cities. Bus routes, taxis, subways in bigger cities, and Uber service. And we have proximity to jobs, shops, services. As for the disadvantages, we are talking about negative things of living in the city is that we live in densely packed areas. The population density tends to be higher. If you want to buy a property or land, is very expensive to do it here in the city rather than the rural area. We have little open spaces such as parks and traffic jams. I mean, we live in Chihuahua. Our traffic jams take like 20 minutes, 30 minutes the most, but we suffer of that. And we also suffer of pollution. Rural settlements, okay? These are the small towns and villages often surrounded by farmland. The farmland is where we produce our food, the food that we eat every day, okay? For hundreds of years, it says here that most people live in these rural areas, but industrialization brings progress, and they've also brought factories, maquilas, so people started to move from these towns into the cities in search of jobs, okay? So many of these areas have passed through lots of changes. Some of their characteristics is that these areas are smaller because they also have a smaller population. In Mexico, to be considered a rural settlement, it needs to be less than 2,500 people living in that town, in that village, in that ranch, okay? If they have more than 2,500 people, so they are considered urban settlements. As for the rural settlements, they are also isolated, okay? That means that they are far away from other cities, from other towns, and also the roads may not be efficient to travel through. So some of those roads may be made of only dirt. The only industry that they have is related with the primary industries such as farming, forestry, mining, and fishing. As you can see, the world is changing. In 1950, most of the world, most of the countries in the world, they had rural, most of their people were living in rural areas, okay? That was in the 1950s. As you can see, only North America, Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, Europe, Australia, and Japan, they had most of their people living in urban areas. As for now, in 2018, it's totally different. It has changed. Most of America, only one of the Guyanas is still living in rural areas. Most of their population living in rural areas. But as for the rest of us, we are living in urban areas. Urban areas, I mean cities. We have passed through lots of changes, okay? Now, before there used to people used to live in a house for many generations. Now we have that house only for vacations, only for the weekends. Okay, buildings such as barns were used obviously for that purpose, for farming. Now we may have converted those places into R&B houses or compounds that you rent. Okay, people used to work there. Now if they are still living in rural settlements, most than likely they have to commute to other place in order to work. The transportation links were very limited, only once a day the most. Now they have more routes. And also people used to shop locally. Okay, the stores that they had there, there used to be only for the town. Now, most than likely, the people from rural settlements, they come to the city to do their shopping. And as you can see here, there is an uneven urban growth in all the different countries. As you can see, almost all of North America, it is already has already urban population, as well as in Europe, while in Asia and Africa, the majority of their population are still being rural population. Finally, we have some factors that move people from rural settlements into urban areas. We have the negative factors, which are the push factors. Okay, these are natural disasters. In Mexico, we have hurricanes, earthquakes. Okay, here in Chihuahua, we have the drought. Do you remember what is a drought? A drought is when it doesn't rain for many years. Okay, that is a natural disaster. If that happens here in Chihuahua, most likely the people who live in rural areas, they will experience crop failure. What does it mean? That they won't be able to grow anything on their lands. So in that case, they won't have any money. So if they don't have any money, they will experience poor living conditions. That means that their standard of living will go down. They won't have money. They will get some debt with the bank. So they will have no other option but to sell their houses, abandon their towns, and come to live in the city. Also, one push factor is the conflict and war. Here in Mexico, unfortunately, we have the organized crime, which also has brought a lot of conflict into the rural areas. So some people, they just had to abandon their ranches in order to survive, to save their lives. And so they have come to the cities. As for the pull factors, kids, those are positive factors that made people think about it and decide to come to the cities. These are higher wages. We earn more money here in the cities than in the rural areas. We also have access to healthcare and education. Okay, if a person is sick in your family and you live in a rural area, it would be very difficult for that person to move from his or her town into the city. So some of that people just decide to come and live here, rent a house in order to have access to healthcare. Also education. It is very common that many people from also small cities, but they're small, they rather come here and study than stay in their own towns because we have more options. Once they graduated, they also have more jobs. They have more options of jobs. So this is another positive factor to stay in the city. And finally, the last condition, it will be to have a better living conditions. They have more services. They have more routes, entertainment centers, and options to live. So these are some of the characteristics of and factors that people experience to move from rural to urban areas.